The house is quiet now, too quiet. You walk past your child's empty bedroom and the silence feels heavy, unfamiliar. For years, your days revolved around schedules, school pickups, soccer practice, homework help, endless meals prepared and cleaned. You knew your role, you knew what mattered, but now they're gone, living their own lives, and you're left standing in a home that suddenly feels too big, with hours that stretch out like questions you don't know how to answer. Who are you when you're no longer needed in the same way? What do you do with time that used to belong to someone else? The skills that defined you, organizing chaos, solving problems, keeping everyone fed and functioning, they don't translate to this new chapter. You realize with unsettling clarity that no one prepared you for this. The empty nest isn't just about missing your kids. It's about discovering you've forgotten how to be a person outside of being their parent. And now you have to learn again. Here's the paradox. You spent decades developing skills to raise capable, independent human beings, and you succeeded. But in doing so, you neglected the skills you need to live your own life. You became an expert at managing their needs while quietly abandoning your own. You learned patience, organization, conflict resolution, emotional regulation, all in service of someone else. Now that they're gone, those skills feel useless. The house doesn't need managing the same way. The calendar sits mostly empty. The constant motion that defined your identity has stopped. And in the stillness, you realize you don't know who you are anymore. The world celebrates the empty nest as freedom, a chance to reclaim your life. But no one tells you how disorienting that freedom feels when you've forgotten what you actually want. You spent so long being needed that you don't know how to simply be. The skills that matter now, rediscovering your interests, building a life that isn't centered on caregiving, forming an identity separate from parenthood, they weren't taught. Society prepared you to be a parent, but not to stop being one. And so you sit in the quiet, surrounded by space and time, feeling lost in a life that's supposed to finally be yours. The paradox deepens when you realize your relationship with your partner, if you have one, has also been shaped by shared parenting. You were co-managers of chaos, united by a common purpose. Now, without that glue, you look at each other and wonder, who are we to each other when we're not just parents? Conversations that used to revolve around logistics, who's picking up whom, what needs to be done, now peter out into awkward silence. You're not sure how to connect without the buffer of your children's lives. Friendships, too, reveal their fragility. The bonds formed over playdates and school events dissolve when those connections no longer apply. You realize many relationships were circumstantial, not deep. The loneliness of the empty nest isn't just about missing your kids. It's about recognizing how much of your social world revolved around them. You need new skills now. The ability to cultivate adult friendships, to pursue your own interests, to rebuild intimacy with your partner, to sit with yourself without distraction. But after decades of putting yourself last, these skills feel foreign, and learning them in midlife feels harder than it should. The first skill you need after your kids leave home is the hardest one: learning to sit with yourself. For years, you filled every moment with tasks: cooking, cleaning, driving, worrying. Busyness became your identity. Now, in the quiet, you have to face what you've been avoiding: your own company. At first, the silence feels unbearable. You reach for your phone, turn on the TV, create busy work to avoid the discomfort. But the Stoics understood something crucial. Solitude isn't emptiness, it's where you rediscover yourself. You begin slowly carving out moments to simply be. Morning coffee without distraction, an evening walk without purpose, sitting on the porch watching the light change. In these small acts, you start to remember what it feels like to exist without an agenda. The second skill is rediscovering your interests. You used to have hobbies, passions, things that made you lose track of time. But somewhere between diapers and college applications, those parts of you disappeared. Now, you have the chance to reclaim them or discover new ones. You start tentatively. Maybe you pick up a book you've been meaning to read for years. Maybe you sign up for a class that sounds interesting. Maybe you pull out an old guitar or painting supplies that have been gathering dust. At first, it feels awkward, even selfish. You're so used to prioritizing others that doing something purely for yourself feels wrong. But with practice, the guilt fades. You remember that joy doesn't need justification. You realize that reclaiming your interests isn't indulgent. It's essential to becoming whole again. The third skill is rebuilding your relationship with your partner, if you're in one. For years, you functioned as a parenting team. You divided labor, solved problems, managed schedules. But you rarely connected as individuals. Now, without the constant demands of children, you have to learn to be partners again, not just co-managers. This requires vulnerability. You have to admit that you don't know how to talk to each other anymore. You have to confess that you've grown apart, or perhaps never really knew each other outside your roles as parents. The work begins with small, intentional acts. You schedule date nights, not elaborate or expensive, just time together without distractions. You ask each other questions you haven't asked in years. What are you excited about? What are you afraid of? What do you want from this next chapter? You listen, really listen, without trying to fix or solve. You rediscover the person you chose to build a life with, beneath the layers of responsibility you both carried. Some relationships don't survive this transition. The partnership that worked under the structure of parenting collapses without it. If this happens, it's not failure, it's honesty. You may discover that you stayed together for the kids, and now that they're gone, there's nothing left. The courage to acknowledge this and move forward separately is its own kind of skill. Letting go of a relationship that no longer serves either of you is painful, but it's also an act of integrity. You deserve more than coexistence. So does your partner. The fourth skill is cultivating adult friendships. During the parenting years, friendships were often built around your kids, other parents at school events, sports teams, play dates. Those connections were convenient, but not always deep. Now, you need to build friendships based on who you are, not who your children are. This feels daunting. Making friends as an adult is awkward. You don't have the built-in structures of youth: school, dorms, shared activities. But the Stoics remind you, meaningful connection requires effort. You start by reaching out. You invite someone for coffee. You join a club, a volunteer group, a class. You show up regularly, making yourself available. You practice vulnerability, sharing not just surface pleasantries, but real thoughts and struggles. Slowly, friendships form. They're not the same as the relationships you had in your 20s, but they're deeper, built on choice and mutual understanding rather than proximity. The fifth skill is learning to navigate your relationship with your adult children. They're not gone. They're independent. This distinction matters. You have to let go of the role of primary caretaker and learn to relate to them as adults. This means resisting the urge to solve their problems, give unsolicited advice, or insert yourself into their lives uninvited. It means respecting their boundaries, even when it hurts. It means allowing them to make mistakes without rushing in to fix things. This restraint is excruciating. Every instinct screams at you to protect, to guide, to intervene. But the skill you need now is trust. Trust that you raise them well, that they're capable, that they'll reach out if they truly need you. You learn to be available without being intrusive. You offer support when asked, but you don't impose. You celebrate their independence, even as you grieve the loss of being needed in the old way. The sixth skill is finding purpose beyond parenting. For years, your purpose was clear: raise your children. Now, you need to discover what gives your life meaning when that central mission is complete. This isn't easy. Purpose doesn't announce itself. You have to search for it, experiment, try things that might not work. Maybe you volunteer for a cause you care about. Maybe you mentor younger people navigating challenges you've faced. Maybe you throw yourself into your career with renewed focus. Maybe you start a passion project you've been putting off. The key is to stop waiting for purpose to find you and start actively creating it. You ask yourself, what problems do I care about solving? What skills do I have that could serve others? What would I do if failure wasn't a concern? The answers guide you toward a life that feels meaningful, even without the structure of active parenting. The seventh skill is managing grief. The empty nest brings loss, even if your children are thriving. You grieve the end of an era, the closeness you once had, the identity you held for so long. This grief is real and deserves acknowledgement. The Stoics taught that resisting grief only prolongs suffering. You allow yourself to feel it. You cry when you need to. You talk about it with people who understand. You honor the transition without getting stuck in it. Grief and gratitude can coexist. You mourn what's gone while celebrating what remains. Your children are healthy, independent, pursuing their own lives. This is what you hoped for. The sadness doesn't negate the pride. Both are true. The eighth skill is creating new routines. The old rhythms of your life, school drop-offs, family dinners, bedtime rituals, no longer apply. Without structure, days can feel aimless. You need to build new routines that give shape to your time. Maybe you establish a morning ritual that centers you: meditation, exercise, reading. Maybe you designate certain evenings for creative pursuits or social connection. Maybe you plan regular outings that give you something to look forward to. These routines don't have to be rigid, but they provide scaffolding. They help you feel less adrift in the open expanse of time. The ninth skill is practicing self-compassion. You will mess up this transition. You'll feel lost, make mistakes, struggle to adjust. The temptation is to judge yourself harshly, to believe you should have it figured out by now. But the Stoics remind you, wisdom comes from experience, not expectation. You're learning new skills in a new phase of life. It's okay to be a beginner. You treat yourself with the same kindness you'd offer a friend navigating this change. You forgive yourself for the awkward attempts, the false starts, the days when you feel overwhelmed by the emptiness. You remind yourself that growth is messy, and that's okay. The 10th skill is embracing uncertainty. The empty nest opens up a vast, undefined future. You don't know what this chapter holds. That uncertainty is uncomfortable, but it's also liberating. For years, your life followed a predictable script. Now, you get to write your own. You don't have to have it all figured out. You can explore, experiment, change your mind. The Stoics called this amor fati, love of fate. You embrace the unknown, trusting that meaning will emerge as you move forward. You let go of the need for a perfect plan and instead cultivate curiosity about what might unfold. Slowly, these skills compound. The discomfort of the empty nest begins to soften. The house that felt too quiet starts to feel peaceful. The time that seemed empty starts to feel spacious. You discover that this phase of life, while different from what came before, holds its own gifts: freedom, self-discovery, the chance to build a life that's truly yours. You realize that learning to live after your kids leave home isn't about replacing what you lost. It's about becoming someone new, someone who can hold both the grief of what's gone and the excitement of what's possible. When you commit to learning these life skills after your kids leave home, the transformation unfolds in ways you couldn't anticipate. The first benefit is rediscovering yourself. For years, you were defined by your role as a parent. Now, you get to explore who you are beyond that identity. You reconnect with parts of yourself that went dormant: your creativity, your curiosity, your sense of adventure. You pursue interests without needing to justify them. You make choices based on what you want, not what your children need. This reclamation of self isn't selfish. It's essential. You become a fuller, more integrated person, and that wholeness radiates into every area of your life. Your relationships deepen in unexpected ways. When you learn to sit with yourself, you become better company for others. When you rediscover your interests, you have more to share in conversations. When you practice vulnerability, you invite others to do the same. Friendships that survive this transition become richer because they're chosen, not circumstantial. Your relationship with your partner, if it adapts, reaches a new level of intimacy. You're no longer just co-parents. You're companions in this new chapter. You rediscover each other or discover each other for the first time. Date nights aren't obligations, they're genuine enjoyment. Conversations go deeper because you're not exhausted from managing chaos. Physical intimacy can even improve because you have time, energy, and freedom you haven't had in years. Your relationship with your adult children improves too. When you step back and allow them independence, you stop being the nagging parent and become someone they want to connect with. They call you not out of obligation, but because they value your perspective. They share their lives because you've respected their boundaries. The relationship becomes more mutual, more adult to adult. You're no longer managing their lives. You're witnessing them build their own. This shift is bittersweet, but it's also beautiful. You get to see the people they've become, shaped by your guidance, but fully their own. You gain time, precious, unstructured time that's yours to shape. At first, this feels disorienting, but once you learn to fill it intentionally, it becomes a gift. You have space for hobbies, passions, rest, connection. You can travel spontaneously without coordinating schedules. You can pursue career goals with renewed focus. You can volunteer for causes you care about. You can simply do nothing without guilt. This freedom allows you to design a life that reflects your values, not just your obligations. Your mental health improves. The constant low-level anxiety of active parenting, worrying about safety, performance, well-being begins to ease. You still care deeply about your children, but you're no longer responsible for every outcome. This release of control is liberating. You sleep better. You worry less. You have mental bandwidth for things other than logistics and crisis management. The skills you've developed, self-compassion, sitting with uncertainty, building purpose, these create emotional resilience that serves you in every challenge you face. You discover new purpose. The empty nest doesn't mean your life loses meaning. It means you get to choose new sources of meaning. Maybe you throw yourself into work with renewed passion. Maybe you start the business you've always dreamed of. Maybe you become a mentor, a volunteer, a community leader. Maybe you focus on personal growth, getting healthier, learning new skills, traveling, creating art. Whatever you choose, it's yours. You're no longer living for someone else's needs. You're living for your own sense of purpose. This agency is empowering. It reminds you that your life isn't over just because your children have grown. It's evolving, and you're in control of that evolution. Your marriage, if it survives and adapts, enters what can be its golden years. You have time together without interruptions. You can be spontaneous. Decide to go out to dinner. Take a weekend trip. Stay in bed late. The partnership that was forged in the crucible of parenting can now relax into something easier, more playful. You laugh more. You enjoy each other's company. You remember why you chose each other in the first place. If your relationship struggled under the weight of parenting, this phase gives you a chance to rebuild. Some couples discover they're more compatible now than they were when they were drowning in responsibilities. You become a model for your children. They watch how you navigate this transition, whether you collapse into emptiness or rise into possibility. When you thrive after they leave, you teach them that life doesn't end when parenting shifts. You show them that people can continue to grow, change, and find joy at any age. You demonstrate resilience, adaptability, and the courage to reinvent yourself. These lessons shape how they'll navigate their own futures. You gain confidence. Learning new skills in midlife, making friends, rediscovering interests, building purpose proves to yourself that you're still capable of growth. You're not stuck. You're not finished. You're still learning, still evolving. This confidence extends beyond the empty nest. You take risks you would have avoided before. You speak up more. You pursue opportunities. You trust yourself in ways you didn't when you were constantly second-guessing your parenting decisions. Perhaps most importantly, you find peace. The grief of the empty nest doesn't disappear, but it becomes manageable. You learn to hold both loss and gratitude. You mourn the end of one chapter while celebrating the beginning of another. You accept that change is constant, that letting go is part of loving, that growth requires leaving familiar ground. The stoic practice of acceptance becomes your foundation. You stop fighting reality and start working with it. This peace isn't passive. It's active engagement with life as it is, not as you wish it were. The benefits of these life skills compound over time. What feels awkward and difficult at first becomes natural. What seems like loss reveals itself as possibility. The empty nest transforms from a painful ending into a hopeful beginning. You realize that this phase of life, when approached with courage and intention, holds gifts you couldn't access when you were in the thick of parenting. You're free in ways you haven't been since before your children were born. And this time, you have the wisdom to appreciate that freedom. The quiet house doesn't feel so heavy anymore. You've learned to sit with the silence, and in that silence, you've found yourself again. The empty nest, which once felt like an ending, has revealed itself as a beginning. A chance to build a life that's wholly yours, shaped by your choices rather than your obligations. The skills you've developed, sitting with yourself, rediscovering your interests, rebuilding relationships, finding new purpose. These aren't just survival tactics. They're the foundation for a life that's deeper, richer, and more authentic than what came before. You realize now that the years of active parenting, while beautiful and meaningful, also required you to fragment yourself. You gave pieces of your time, energy, and identity to your children because that's what love demanded. But now, you get to gather those pieces back. You get to reassemble yourself, not as you were before you had kids, but as someone new, shaped by the experience of parenting, but no longer defined by it. This reconstruction is sacred work. It's the work of midlife, and it's worthy of your full attention. The relationship with your children has transformed. You're no longer their manager, their chauffeur, their constant source of solutions. You're their parent, yes, but in a different way. Available when needed, but not intrusive. Present, but not hovering. This shift is painful because it requires letting go, but it's also liberating. You trust that you did your job well. You raise people who can navigate the world without you micromanaging every step. That trust is both an act of faith and a recognition of reality. They're ready, and so are you. Your marriage, if you've done the work, has entered a new season. You're rediscovering each other, or discovering each other for the first time. The partnership that was built around shared responsibilities now has the chance to become a true companionship. You're not just surviving together, you're enjoying each other. You're choosing each other daily, not out of obligation, but out of genuine desire to share this next chapter. If your relationship didn't survive the transition, you've learned that honesty, even when painful, is kinder than pretense. You've given yourself permission to pursue a life that aligns with your truth. The friendships you've cultivated in this phase are different from the ones you had before. They're not based on convenience or proximity. They're built on mutual interest, vulnerability, and choice. These relationships sustain you in ways that superficial connections never could. You've learned that it's never too late to make real friends, to find your people, to build community that reflects who you are now, not who you used to be. The purpose you've discovered, whether through work, volunteering, creative pursuits, or personal growth, gives your days structure and meaning. You're no longer living in service to someone else's timeline. You're living for yourself, and that's not selfish. It's essential. You've spent decades putting others first. This chapter is yours. You get to decide what matters, what brings joy, what deserves your energy. That agency is powerful. It reminds you that your life isn't over. It's just beginning in a different key. The grief hasn't disappeared. You still miss the chaos sometimes, the noise, the feeling of being needed in that all-consuming way. But you've learned to hold that grief alongside gratitude. You're proud of who your children have become. You're grateful for the years you had together, and you're excited, tentatively but genuinely, about what comes next. The Stoics taught that acceptance doesn't mean resignation. It means engaging fully with reality as it is. You've accepted the empty nest, and in that acceptance, you've found freedom. So here you are, standing in a quiet house that no longer feels empty. It feels spacious, full of possibility, full of you. The life skills you've learned after your kids left home aren't just about surviving the transition, they're about thriving in it. They're about reclaiming your identity, rebuilding your relationships, and rediscovering your purpose. They're about learning to live again, not as someone's parent, but as yourself. The next chapter is waiting. It's uncertain, yes, but it's also wide open. You have the skills now to navigate it with grace, courage, and hope. You're ready. You've always been ready. Welcome home.